Entonces, cuando yo era niño, yo sabía que era español, porque hablaban español en la casa, todo el pueblo hablaba español. Entonces, yo no sabía que era de la isla Canaria, porque ellos decían, era español, sí, bueno, entonces soy español, vino de España. Pero después de que mucho tiempo, cuando comenzaron las organizaciones aquí, eso es cuando nosotros enteramos que éramos canarios.
We called ourselves Isleños but not because we knew we were Canary Islanders, because Delacroix Island is where most of the Isleños were living. So we were islanders, Isleños, but we didn't realize we were Canarian Isleños.
Alcée Faltier was a very great linguist and academician in 19th century Louisiana. In 1891, he visited Ile de la Croix, or La Isla de la Croix, and there he interviewed an elderly lady who was reputed to be in her 90s. And he asked her where she was born, and she said, I'm born here, Señor. And then he said, and where were your parents born? And she said, in España. And then he said, well, where in España? And she said, en la isla. And then he said, well, which islands? And she said, well, the islands that everyone came from. So that we see that by the 1890s, already the knowledge of the origin of the colonists who arrived in the late 18th century had become obscured.
When we first found out we were Isleños from the Canary Islands, it was a moment of great joy and happiness because that kind of added to our identity. It clarified our identity, and we're very proud of it.
Most people here didn't know where the Canary Islands were. All of that had been lost. You know, yes, we are Hispanic or Spanish, but the Isleño roots were all but forgotten until uncovering the facts showed a different path, and clearly where our historic and cultural roots were.
It was great getting back to the roots of where you came from. It's just amazing. For hundreds of years, we never had no idea where we came from.
777, varias familias dejaron las Islas Canarias para la costa de Cuba, Texas y sur de la Louisiana. En tierra regalada se pusieron de jardinero para mantenerse esta familia. Entre el pato y la rata, entre el agua y las plerías, con el ayudo de las mujeres, se buscaron la vía. Entre penas y tormentos y la voluntad de Dios, así nace en Pueblo La Costa de la parroquia San Bernardo. Viva España y su bandera, que con todo mi corazón sé que somos americanos, pero sangre de español.
Isleño soldiers were incorporated into the militia to defend Spanish Louisiana almost immediately upon their arrival. Spanish Governor Bernardo Galvez brought them here specifically to settle the outlying areas around New Orleans to help form a protective ring around the settlement out of fear of British attack.
When Galvez became governor of Louisiana, Spain was anticipating having a war with Britain. And because Britain was in charge of the area that they call West Florida. Galvez's father was the governor in the Canary Islands, and so he said, I need to have some recruits. So they recruited in the Canary Islands to get soldiers for the Galvez's army to come here both as soldiers and settlers so that they would be able to build up the army for Galvez for his campaign against the British.
The Battle of New Orleans is one of the most important battles in our nation's history, and it has often been overlooked. The 3rd Militia Regiment during this campaign also played a very important role because this is their home area. The British troops are coming in through the area that the Isleños had settled. They were sent out as scouts. They were Jackson's primary scouting unit.
These people were Isleños. At this time, they are not Spanish. They are Americans. And they could guide Andrew Jackson and his men into the positions that they needed to be. They were extremely valuable during that fight. It's amazing how quickly people can form an allegiance with the country in which they are living, and particularly in times like this, because before anybody else in this area of Louisiana, their homes were the ones that had been invaded.
The Canary Islanders, when they came, they settled in about 5 different places. There were 2 places in San Bernardo and Tierra de los Bues. And also they came up the Mississippi River to Galvez Town and also to Valenzuela on Bayou Lafourche. And besides that, they were situated at Barataria. The settlement that they had in St. Bernard, that's different because St. Bernard was a small community basically isolated from the rest of the state. Those people there, they maintained a lot of their own culture. They sang their decimas traditionally. They invented and composed new decimas. They kept the language, the Spanish language, from generation to generation. And that's really where the flame of the Canary Islands heritage continues to burn. Down in St. Bernard Parish.
But we Isleños were isolated. Nobody went through St. Bernard to get to anywhere else. So it's kind of stopped at the parish line, and nobody knew about us.
After our American Civil War, the plantation economy of St. Bernard was destroyed. And at that point, this group of Canary Islanders retreated into the easternmost reaches of St. Bernard Parish, and there they became subsistence livers, so that they became trappers of fur-bearing animals, professional hunters, commercial fishermen, and moss gatherers.
The Isleños did what they had to do out of necessity. Back a couple of 100 years ago, 150 years ago, whatever, they were actually people that hunted ducks and sold them. And that was part of the, in other words, you're going to put a lot into a decoy if you know it's going to feed your family. And that's the bottom line, you know, do the best you can when you make a decoy. dad owns, his father owned, and my grandfather, which he trapped on it. But it's a great thing. I'm glad I brought my son up. My dad brought me doing it. I brought my son up, and matter of fact, yesterday his wife gave birth to a little girl, but keep the tradition going. And that's what we do. Pass the time down here in Louisiana.
I'll tell you, this place was a family-oriented place. It really was. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody helped everybody. You know, if you needed something done, and he knew how to do it, well, he'd go help you do it. You know, even if you had to speak English with him. But you know, one of the last, my oldest brother, him and I we were trapping nutria and otters. We left here at 7 o'clock that morning. 8 o'clock, I brought him home dead at the age of 56. So it's a terrible thing to have to come in here. Well, the worst part, I had to come in here and tell my mother that he had passed away, you know. But as far as anything else, I don't regret anything I ever did in my life down here. 90% of the older people that were here spoke Spanish fluently, too. It's not, you know.
Estos sí que son trabajo, estos sí que son fatiga, que pasa un prove trampero para mantener la familia. Estos sí que son fatiga. Se juntaron todos los niños y me agarraron de mano para ver cómo nos haceremos cuando llegue este verano, si es más malo que el pasado.
Yeah, you know, farming and trapping and fishing, and that's just part of our heritage. And I guess you can almost say it comes natural. I'm very proud about my Spanish and my Isleno heritage. And I'm very proud of that part of my family. We're very hard-working people. And yet we still held our identity, you see.
Cuando yo era chico, habían 250 y pico familias aquí abajo. Esto era tu casa. Yo tenía que ir a la escuela para aprender inglés. Fui a la escuela y eso después no más español. Nada más que cuando llegaba a casa, ellos hablaban español y después pararon. Ellos hablaban inglés, todito nosotros.
My mother spoke Spanish 7 years before she spoke English. Very few of us speak Spanish now. But in 1916, the Louisiana legislature passed a law forbidding any other language other than English to be spoken in school and on the playground. And a lot of the parents would not teach their children Spanish because it was a problem. It would be a problem for them. And many of them said, well, just be a good American and speak English.
The story of Louisiana, in many respects, is how the cultura criolla evolved in Louisiana and how people became, as we would say in English, creolized or creolized, how our ancestors became part of a distinct culture which evolved here in Louisiana. And though there is a distinct culture in southern Louisiana, St. Bernard is unique amongst all of the other areas where the Creole culture is predominant. This is the only parish wherein people became Hispanized. For example, we have the family Robin, which is today called Robin. The original Robin was Gilles Robin. He came from Bretagne to the Caribbean, and then from there here. He married an Isleña. His children married Isleñas. By the third generation, Robins had become Robin, and they were speaking Spanish as their language. And then, of course, as the Spaniards came here, there was already a huge colony of Canary Islanders and their descendants in St. Bernard Parish, which they founded. So that when you had a Gallego come here, after a while, there weren't many other Gallegos here. So what was he to do but to begin to speak as the Canarios spoke? What defined St. Bernard was the Canarian cultural presence and the Canarian linguistic presence.
¿Usted sabe lo que hacía John Robin? Yo siempre me acuerdo de cuando los niños tenían calentura. Cogía cebolla y papa y las ponía en la planta de los pies con vinagre. Y después ponía un sazón por arriba.
Y eso curaba.
Y le quitaba la calentura, salía. Yo me acuerdo de ir con mi hija. Y el médico decía, what a stupid thing to do.
In my youth, I first remember seeing the blessings of the fishing fleet. And these blessings of the fishing fleet occurred in the summer. And they were very, very festive. And of course there, the parish priest would bless the boats. And then there would be dancing, singing, no English spoken. A great deal of drinking. They loved their beer, they loved their red wine. You would hear sometimes the older people singing decimas. And when they sang the decimas, they would sing them in rounds. So it was not one person to sing, but multiple people. And I remember that one of the most ridiculous of the decimas was the Valsa de Boy Molero, or Boy Molero's fishing boat. And in English, the description of the boat is that it was so big that the boat extended from La Isla de la Croix to downtown New Orleans. And that the electric lights on the boat were so bright that it illuminated all of this region of Louisiana. And then they would go on to describe where Boy Molero got his crew.
Boy Molero vino a la isla, el hombre habla con su razón, que anda buscando gente para pescar el camarón. En la isla contra 20, en Bencheque 21 solamente, que en el tono no pude encontrar ninguno. Voy a mandar a hacer una barca con una buena largura, que cuando la proba y aquí, que la popa en Chepitula. Cuando el boy encendió las luces y en el centro del mar se quedó todo alumbrado como la calle Canal.
Well, I hate to see that evening sun go down. Well, I hate to see that evening sun go down, 'cause it makes me think about my last go round.
Prohibition came into being here in the United States, and it was an opportunity for the Isleños to make money. And of course, their location was such, and they knew the marshes and the bayous and the rivers and everything very well because they had trapped them all their lives. And so they would run rum from Cuba, bring it into the parish, and then from the parish into New Orleans. My grandfather had a truck, and he had the connections with the Isleños. And so instead of vegetables and fruit and seafood, they started running rum. So as a result, he made a lot of money, and everybody else that made a lot of money too.
The whiskey would come in on a big schooner, and they'd anchor that off the coast. It was open water then. And the smaller boats would run out there and get it. They'd come up these ditches to the front. They would take and load it into cars and then trucks, and they'd haul it to New Orleans. And I used to hunt with an old man that did it. And he told me, he said, if they didn't melt my car down for scrap iron, he said, it's still in good shape. And I asked him, why you figure that? The car had this was 40 years ago. And that was 40 years even before that probably. And he said, I used to paint it 3 times a week with a paintbrush, make it different colors for the revenuers couldn't find him, wouldn't notice him. He said, I painted that thing. He said, the paint must be that thick on that car, because he kept painting it.
One of the very prominent Canary Island descendants, who was renowned for his strength and vigor, had gone out in the Gulf of Mexico in the early spring or late winter in the 1920s. And there was a terrible cold front and storm in the Gulf with 30 and 40-foot high waves. And so in the Gulf, he saw this man floating, and he was holding on to a crate of liquor. And the fellow was screaming, "Ayúdame." And so the Isleño dove into the water, and he rescued this poor, unfortunate soul, brought him to the boat, revived him, and it turned out that this fellow, who spoke rather well Spanish, was Al Capone. So they became very great good friends. They knew each other for the remainder of their lives. And as a token of his esteem for an appreciation for having saved his life, he gave this Isleño a yellow diamond stick pin in the shape of a monkey. The Isleños had, they had tremendous ability to weather storms and to weather adversity, and they always knew how to make the best of perhaps the worst situations.
Canarias, fuimos a Tenerife y estamos buscando donde vivían los ancestros. Y mi mujer, venía, la gente de ella vinieron de Taganana y fuimos a visitar Taganana y hallamos la casa. Y todo eso estaba rota, pero todavía tenía el molino de gofio en la cocina. Y todo eso, ay, me tocó. Ella también me tocó tanto que no puedo aplicar como sentimos el sentimiento de los canales. Era muy bonito.
My ancestors came from Tenerife. There was a town in Tahina. My husband and I went to Tahina and we found the church that they were christened in and that parents were married in. And we were going to go back and have our wedding on the 50th anniversary, but he passed away before then, 3 years before that. Now, when we went to the Canary Islands in Tenerife, there was a doctor there that did a DNA test, and my DNA came up Wanche. We say all the time, we're tough, we Isleños. We say that, we could handle it. We explain, because all the people that I knew that were older people were strong people, that they could handle anything, you know. And that's what I say all the time. I can handle it, I'm an Isleño.
Most people have an inner yearning to know who you are. Who are we? Who am I? Your ancestry, your cultural roots is a very important part of that. People who would leave their own land and travel across an ocean to an unknown destination and arrive in an area that was undeveloped. We hope that we have some of that gene pool in us so that we can have the moral fabric and courage that our ancestors had.
What kind of blues
disease that can't be explained. It's a mean old kind of blues that makes us ride these cannonball trains.
When the United States purchased Louisiana, the Isleños then became Americans. It wasn't like we had a vote. It was like, boom, that's it. The ones that didn't want to be Americans, they moved to Baton Rouge because Baton Rouge was still Spanish at the Louisiana Purchase. And there's a little place in Baton Rouge now called Spanish Town, which was set up for the Spaniards who didn't want to stay in Louisiana and be Americans. But the rest of the Isleños, they had their farms, they had their families, they're not going to go anywhere. And they became Americans. Well, of course, one of the things about being an American is the military services. And so Isleños has served in every war that the United States has had as a United States. And I've had ancestors involved in every war. I was in the Army during Vietnam, and my son served in the Gulf.
We became Americans in the War of 1812, and I have some of my family relatives fought in there. And for some reason, I had distant cousins fought in the Marines in World War I. I had 4 cousins fought in the Marines in World War II. And I think I had no other choice but to join the Marine Corps, which I thought was the best military unit in the country. Yes, I was willing to die for my country. I was lucky enough not to, didn't have to, but I did lose some friends. Many of us Isleños from St. Bernard Parish,
I was in the 101st Airborne Division. Yes, a lot of people from here was doing the fighting. It was all 101st Airborne, man. They was doing the fighting with the 101st against the Germans. In fact, when a man that was enlisted with me, enlisted in the division with me, he got killed the first day we went out on patrol. He was a LeBlanc from Lafayette. First battle we went into, he got killed. And that hurt me more than anything else. But you gotta learn to take it and go with it, because when you're fighting because you're fighting. That's it. I gotta survive, but I gotta kill the other guy to be able to survive. And that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do what I can to survive, and if I kill somebody, like in Bastogne. Bastogne was the worst battle I had ever seen in my life. And that was, you wouldn't think that many people could get killed in such a short time. We lost 2/3 of our division in Bastogne. That wasn't an easy war, I tell you that. I went to 2.5 years of it, and I tell you what, it wasn't easy. We made it, and we're still here. I'm still here. A lot of us are not, but I guess it was worth it. Some I knew, some I didn't.
Orleans is unique in many aspects, including food, music, and so many things, because it is a blend of so many different cultures. And don't minimize the Isleño culture in the contribution that it made.
My name is Robert Nunez. I'm a descendant of Alcide Nunez. He actually was born in St. Bernard Parish. I grew up in St. Bernard Parish also. He and others, it was the earliest improvisation in jazz. I mean, the start of it was with him and some of the other players who started basically on street bands in New Orleans. At the time, they were basically like modern rock stars in 1919. He formed a band, Louisiana 5, and they made records approximately in 1919. So at the time, he was also a founding member of original Dixieland Jazz Band. He made the earliest recordings of traditional New Orleans jazz.
Those recordings sold so well, the Louisiana 5, that it was like the very first rock and roll recordings. People all over the United States and Europe, and I'm finding out Shanghai, China, this was sensational. So it was like the Beatles or Elvis Presley. You know, and Alcide, for the first 10 years, was a superstar. His name was all over the place, along with a handful of other special New Orleans clarinetists. And people, all the clarinetists around the country and in Europe wanted to copy this style. It's hard to bring back the sheer magnitude of the impact that the first jazz musicians were making. If jazz had not evolved into existence, rock wouldn't have existed, because it, in turn, is an offshoot of jazz in the 1940s. So I said, all of this music is connected. It's a wonderful a coincidence of history, I think, that one of the key figures in the most precious component of early New Orleans jazz, that he was an Isleño. And coincidentally, in the late 20s, the very first recording of Cajun music anywhere, and its impact is impossible to exaggerate, around the country and Europe, was also an Isleño, Joe Falcón.
Joe's father spoke Spanish. He spoke Spanish very well, to the point that Joe wished he could speak Spanish. His father was Isleño. By the time Joe is in his late 20s, he's playing a lot at house parties. People would invite him and the bros to these houses, and they would all play Maison de Bal, where they would all come together and they would dance. A police juror in Rain realizes, if I can get a record made by the Bro and the Falcon family, if I can just get them to go to New Orleans and cut a record, I could sell that record here in my store or on the street or wherever. And his friends in New Orleans tell him, Columbia Records is coming to New Orleans and they want to record. And they're looking for rural music, folk music at the time. He gets to New Orleans with Cleoma and his friend is slated to sing the song. But he gets up there and Joe looks at him and he's ghost white. And he says, are you okay? And he's like, Joe, I don't think I can sing this song. Stage fright. He says, it's okay, I'll sing it. He grabs his accordion, Cleoma grabs her guitar, and they record 2 songs, The Waltz That Carried Me to My Grave and Allons à Lafayette. It's the first Cajun recording, commercial recording, ever done. By October, from what we can tell, the recording was released and it sold like hotcakes. People bought them, bought double copies, 3 copies, because back then when you played a record, you would play it so much you would ruin the record. The grooves would just get worn out. And so people would buy backup copies, you know. It sold. And Columbia thought, oh my goodness, we have a market here. We can sell regional music in regional areas and make a big, big profit. They come down, Cajun artists start coming out. They start recording all sorts of Cajun artists, Leo Swallow, Mayus LaFleur, Amadi Ardouin, Dennis McGee. They travel to Atlanta, San Antonio, Dallas, Texas, Memphis, Tennessee. Some of them, they come and they bus them back to New York City. They bus them to Chicago. They realize there's more than blues and jazz in South Louisiana.
Because Falcón, the group he had, led with the accordion, and it wasn't this kind of, it's a little button accordion, which is still handmade in New Orleans. It's like the concertino in Italy, you know, or the bandoneon in Argentina. Because he led the band with an accordion, whereas many of the other bands at that time led with the fiddle, the accordion suddenly became the most important instrument. It became identified with Cajun music around the United States and the world, and to this day it's still the central instrument. Two key figures that lit the fuse of disseminating this music and making people aware of it happen to be Isleños.
I'm back up on the roof. We're hoping we get help soon. We're hoping we don't have to spend a night here. I tried to start that boat earlier. Batteries are dead. There's another one behind the roof right here. This is my family. We made it one more time. And I don't know how. We all still alive. If you can see me. This is Fabian. I'm glad to be alive. I'll never stay through another hurricane again. I will run.
Katrina surprised all of us in its intensity. To give you an idea of the magnitude of the destruction, in St. Bernard, we had approximately 25,000 homes when Katrina struck. Only 10 of those homes did not flood. Not 10,000, 10. Every business, every school, every hospital, every grocery, every post office, every municipal building, all flooded, all within a period of probably 8 to 10 hours. It was like a nuclear bomb had gone off. Nothing left, no life, no sound, nothing.
Vinimos aquí abajo, no había nada. Yo ni sabía dónde la casa estaba. Pasé y vine al fire station, yo sabía que era más para arriba. Y tenía un santo en el patio, ahí tenía un santo. El santo estaba todavía de pie. Se quedó ahí, todavía de pie. La casa limpiada, no había casa. El santo se quedó ahí. Yo lo cogí y llevé para arriba. Ahora lo tengo en la otra casa.
It took years before they ever identified all of the people that died in St. Bernard Parish. There's some people we've never found. Because when Katrina came, it wiped out, I would say, 99.9% of this parish. There was only probably 5 homes that were livable. You lost your home, you lost your vehicle, you lost your job. You lost everything. You had nothing to come back to. A lot of people in St. Bernard Parish are Isleños. And they just couldn't believe it. And when I tell them, there's only about 5, and then I tell them, don't think yours is one of the 5. Please, don't think. We used to watch people coming back in. They'd come down with trailers thinking they had something to get. They had nothing. We'd see ladies and men in the yard crying, just looking at the houses and crying. But we were very fortunate. It could have been more. Had the water come at night, I guarantee you we would have had a need for at least 4,000 body bags. I guarantee you that. But we're working on it. We're not going nowhere. We're not going to drop out of sight.
There were 11 Spanish ships sailing over the sea. We honor their names. Santisimo, Sacramento, San Ignacio de Loyola, La Victoria, La Santa Paz, San Juan Nepomuceno.
We were Spanish. We knew we were Spanish. We did not know we were Canarian Spanish. Frank Fernandez, the founder of the Isleños Society, was an educator, and he did research, and it was he who determined that we were Canarios. And then, as a result, they went to the Canary Islands, and Frank said, we need a museum, and my mother jumped at the occasion. And so we got the museum. And that was when, in late 76, I think, when the society was founded, that we knew we were Isleños. And so we called the society Los Isleños Heritage and Cultural Society, and have been celebrating our heritage ever since.
Through the help of people like Bill, and he made a connection with the Spanish Embassy here in New Orleans, or the consulate here in New Orleans, and via those connections was able to travel to the Canary Islands, and when he came back, it was well established that we had found our home. And there was no denying it. And from that point on, the movement, if we can call it that, continued to grow. And the contacts between our people here and our relatives and family in the Canary Islands grew and grew and grew. And hopefully, the darkness will never descend over that ever again.
The Isleño contribution to the culture of the United States of America is distinct. It's very important. It's unlike any other contribution made by any Hispanic group or another group which does not trace its ancestry or its identity to an Anglo-American culture. So it's been very important. And of course, you know, the Canary Islands themselves are so very important because the New World would not exist as it does without the Canary Islands and the Canary Islanders who inhabited those islands. So that it's very important that we have the Canary Islanders in Louisiana, in the United States, because it makes us part of a global phenomenon, which many Spaniards call Canary Islands, wherein we celebrate and we examine the tremendous contributions of Canary Islanders to the evolution of the Western Hemisphere as we know it today.